somebody I definitely look up to a lot, in more ways than one. Chris Stanton, how are you feeling this evening, sir?
I'm embarrassed by that intro. Thank you very much.
Don't be embarrassed. I can embarrass you way more than that if you want.
No, fantastic, mate. Good to see your face, and hopefully I'll see you in person very soon.
Yeah, I hope so. We've been meaning to do this for a while, so I'm glad that we could sort our schedules. You're a very busy man, hard man to pin down.
Yeah, it's just with a little one that's very lively, and all the things I seem to have, all the pies I seem to have my hands in, it does take up a bit of time. We were just talking earlier about being spontaneous, and that's one thing that's sort of disappeared from my life recently. It's just that spontaneity. So everything has to be scheduled in and fit into a time slot. So
so you've got your own nuclear family. You've had a recent house move, therefore house renovations, and obviously all your online clients. You're doing your own work, and then you also have your own, to be and I don't want to spoil your story or jump in, but being an athlete like yourself, you obviously take time. You need to find time for your own training also. Yeah,
of course. So it's always a balancing act. Just prioritizing what you find important. That'd be my biggest advice to anybody. Is just you know deep down what you really want to do and what makes you tick on a daily basis. It's really just striving for that and just allowing time. Hey, that excuse, I don't have time. We always have time. It's just whether it's a priority. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard someone say recently about, like, if we look on especially someone like myself, if I looked on the hours and usage on my screen time, then it'll just be a big reminder that we've got plenty of time. It's just how we sort of use it. So I'd just like to jump in at the beginning here, Chris, and just start with, I've noticed that people are getting better at it, but it's always that awkward thing, when you do a meet and greet. I know you've been in casts before and done shows, and there's always that awkward moment where you get people to talk about yourself. But it's really important for us to understand how you formed your own opinions and the journey you've been on, and some things that we can potentially, unpack as well. So I'd just like you to, in your own words, in your own time, take it as slow as you want from, things that you think are relevant in your life, but things to hit like your upbringing, whereabouts, maybe your education, your choices, anything that's relevant of how any epiphanies or, any career changes, anything like that. Take it away. The floor is yours.
We could be out here a while on career changes, but let's start at the beginning. Actually, it is quite relevant at the current time. And the reason why I'm saying that is I've just actually gone through sort of a remembering technique through a Mind Valley, which is all about your origin story. And It's unlocked quite a few things for me. I wanted to do something that was quite reflective, and it made me have to really go deep and try and really think and remember about that whole process of growing up. So if we start, I was actually born in London, moved to Scotland, moved back down to the south, all because my parents were in the hotel and hospitality sector. So by the time my first memories come back from when I was around 6 years old. But by that time, I'd moved back from Scotland and down into the south coast. So Weymouth was our destination as a family. We stayed there till I was 18. In Weymouth, the great thing about unlocking my childhood is there's so many most of the memories are actually really, really joyous to think about. It's actually was quite challenging to find moments that have shaped my views today, although the sort of like those painful memories or things that happened. But one sort of memory in particular.
Can I just pause you for 1 second? Can I pause you for 1 second before we go into the memories that you just tell me a little bit more about what made you make this decision, or where did you stumble upon this unlocking of your origin story, which I think is really powerful. And it's kind of what we do at the beginning of every mental health episode, is try and get people to speak about their origin story. And sometimes they're good at it. Sometimes they haven't thought about it and spoke about it in a long time. We kind of tend to forget. Was there a reason or a motivation you knew that it would be important?
Yeah, for two things really. One, for those that don't know, I work with Elliot at Third Space. And something we're really looking at is in terms of visions and values. Something resonated with me recently. But one of my Valley coaches was talking about to really understand yourself. You need to understand everything about your origin of where you've come from. That will help you develop your philosophies, your values, because they're deep rooted from a young age. And then do those philosophies and values resonate into the work you do and how you act as an adult? Because that essentially is what's going to make you happy. Is there anything that could actually create conflict against that? So by understanding you, then you can see, well, do my values now resonate through this? How do I behave to share those values? Secondly, I'm just developing my sort of endurance company. When I say endurance, it's sort of athletic performance and endurance. So I just wanted to understand myself more so that I could then share that more with my athletes to really have that sort of optimal athlete and the coach relationship to find and unlock that potential for them. And I think a lot of that unlocking is quite challenging to find. So I needed to go through that process myself to understand that. If I was going to ask my sort of instructors or my athletes to go through that as well.
Yeah, it's all good and well being open and being happy to take questions and nothing's off the table. But if you don't know your own answers, then you need. There's a bit of work that goes into it, right? We're quite habitual animals when it comes to even thought processes. So if you don't think of something for a long time, even when you've started speaking, memory, the concept of memory is an interesting topic anyway. About like, are you remembering a memory? Are you prompted by something like a photograph? And how do we get a little bit deeper? So yeah, I think it's really important for anything in life. I am agreeing with you, and I think it's a really smart move. On your behalf, business-wise, it's going to transcend and communicate what your morals is. So sorry for interrupting you there. So with that being said, that preface, what are some of the interesting or memories that you've uncovered?
Yeah, I don't apologize. It's all good. I like interrupting. So you can summarize everything really well. Yes, actually, one underlying memory was around when I think I was competing in swimming, and typically at that age you used to compete during the half terms, like every day. And I sort of was very intuitive and perceptive that something wasn't quite right. So say this was on the Tuesday, and then by the Friday, my parents had told me my granddad had passed away, and they hadn't told me for 3 days. So I started to challenge that to my parents. I said that you have to tell me things. Don't keep anything from me. I don't think it's fair. So that sort of developed my sort of themes and values around open honesty and not really shielding that. Make sure you just lay everything on the table. It's not about protecting. But it did come and bite me back. So as well as sort of my athletic and coaching career, I've worked as an actor. And my mum phoned me about 9 a.m. one Saturday morning. And those that know much about pantos, you get 2 shows. And I had a show at 9:30 a.m. And her call to me was that my other granddad had died. So then I had to go on stage like 20 minutes later. So, but I really appreciate the fact that my mum took that on board and knew that I really valued the fact of them being open and honest very quickly and not keeping anything from me. So I couldn't really have anything against that. And that sort of shaped the way I am now with my son, and just trying not to protect him, but really just laying down. Even though he's 4, I thought, well, I might as well start at that stage. So it's one sort of powerful memory that links together.
Yeah, I mean, openness from any age has got to be a good example. I think that I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I don't have any kids. I don't even have a partner, but I'm thinking a lot about like legacy, and thinking a lot about, I've been a child. I've got lovely parents. My mother just joined now watching. But I think there's so much learned behavior from stuff around you from such a young age, characteristics. And, we've got mutual friends the malt houses, and they're going through pregnancy. So we've been speaking a lot about, childhood and that. And I just think that it's definitely a smart way to go, a great example to be set. But what is your opinion? You've gone through that, and anyone who knows pantomime is one end of the spectrum. If you get some sad news, you're going to go in there and you're going to put on a complete front, and it's like super enthusiastic, super happy, silly. So that's tough in itself to go through. What do you think that pure openness and telling you as soon as possible is the best way, or mixing it in with a bit of empathy and timing is something that you've learned now?
Yes, I think displaying empathy and timing, especially around is that person in the right environment to accept that news or to receive that. Because I think that's important as well. And then putting yourself into that position, thinking, like, I've gone through that. And I think everybody will process that information differently. And I think without knowing them or know how they react, it's just about preparing them. So I have some of these news. Are you in a position where I'll be able to give you some bad news right now? And if they can take themselves to a position where that can be delivered more effectively, I think that's probably what I've learned about it. This comes into way of feedback as well. I have to give my coaches that it's all about the environment, because that's the best way to learn within that. So it's never about me. They're receiving that, so they need to be in the best possible position.
You also
does that make sense, by the way?
That does make sense. Yeah, it made sense to me anyway. But if anyone's got further questions on that, then just put it in the chat and we can clarify further. That's fine. You mentioned, off the cuff comment about a lot of change of career. Talk us through chronologically where that has taken you. And, I've definitely used to put a lot of identity of my own on my career and tag the two together. So I wondered if you had any experience of attaching that or changing that as the career's changed.
Well, I'll go through the process and see if you can unstitch anything on that. So yeah, as a young boy, everything was about being in the fire brigade, as you do. That didn't materialize. And it was in around, I'd say 13, 14, when there was sort of lots of interests, where I was going to theatre school at home, massive activity in sport. I was quite academic in terms of very mathematical, very logical. So we're trying to understand where to take that as a direction. And I remember a football coach at the time, and we sat down. I think I was 14. I just broke into so Weymouth are now in the National Football League. And I was playing for their reserves, and he sat me down and said, look, if you want to make this, you have to then make a choice now. And that was quite hard to hear. It's like 13, 14 years old. Like, you've got to make a choice. I thought, cool, this is interesting. And then so I made the choice, and I sat down with my dad and said, look, Dad, I'm gonna really push. I'm gonna go and see if I can go to like theatre school. So a lot of things changed at that point. Then that materialized. So I went to theatre school in 2000. So I did my A levels, and then went to Lanes. Had amazing 3 years, and so everything was really just exploring that. What's interesting is that I didn't really know much about the industry. No one in my family or around was involved in that, so it was all about just a learning curve, and I was quite very naive about what to expect. And then over the following, I'd say 2003 till about 13 years or so, worked extensively in theatre, TV, film, etc. And it was 2011 when I reignited my sort of love of sport. And I was sort of just keeping active, keeping fit, knowing that team sports were sort of off the card. And so I went to just do my level 2. I was quite curious about that whole gym world. Being in London, it was like, oh, cool, this is great. It's an amazing place to go. And then from there on, I was quite fortunate to meet some fantastic people. When I got to a guy called Matt Truscott. who's actually a strength conditioning coach out in the States. And then from that, it was all developed through to be like master trainers through Fit Pro and develop different concepts. So my whole sort of fitness career transitioned alongside my acting career.
Yeah, so they were like working in tandem for quite a while, from like 2011 to at least 5 years there.
Yeah, in some ways they still are, but there was a conscious decision when I had my son that actually theatre was quite challenging. My family live in Spain now, and my wife's family live in South Africa. So in terms of our network, we don't really have, our parents and my brothers don't live anywhere near London. So for us, it was about finding the right lifestyle and balance. And I really just was so curious about the whole coaching element in sport and fitness. And I hadn't come into that in a traditional way where you go to university and do BSc honours in strength and conditioning or sports science, doing your masters. So everything was very much my own self-learning and self-curiosity, thinking, well, what is this? And then that sort of led me into where I am now with that. And still acting to this day. And I don't think that will ever go away. It always remains a sort of passion. But obviously the pandemic has hit that very, very hard, more than any other industry.
Yes. It's kind of non-existent now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard seeing people who've relied on that and so ingrained as that as their lifestyle to see where they're at right now. But yet, what's so interesting is the resilience that type of profession actually is part of you as a character. And so many of my friends are so resilient, and they've taken it as an opportunity. And I just love that philosophy. They've looked for opportunities outside of where they're at. That's actually one thing. Then linking back to my parents, that they provide a lot of opportunity, but I also feel that the opportunity was only relevant to a small area. Like the scope of actually searching for far and wide wasn't as sort of extensive as I think you can obtain in this day and age. And just asking people and approaching people, what's your opinion on this? Who should I go to for this? I mean, that's where the openness. So a lot of things are interconnected. And as we were referring back to sort of that first story, is when you delve back into each other, you quickly realize. I'm not saying it was easy. It took me many times to sort of close my eyes and think to actually obtain any of this. Before it was, I would just think, oh yeah, I used to love spaghetti bolognese. And it was just factual. It was just, I used to have 12 Weetabix in the morning. You think, where am I going with this? What does that mean? It didn't mean anything. And then suddenly something just starts to unlock. So anyone else wants to go through that process, just be patient, because over time, things will come up, and just be open to it. And it's very rewarding. But you do have to be patient.
Yeah, that is. Would you class it as a form of like a meditation that you had to get into it, a meditative state to go back?
That's it. Asking.
I mean, meditation is has many different forms, and people are different anyway.
Do you know, I'm not sure. And I can't necessarily define it. The reason I'm saying that is I do it in small chunks, and I don't actively sit and think, okay, am I going to try and get in this state to remember this? So I think sometimes it's not forcing that. So maybe that's.
Yeah, I think that sounds like meditation to me. It sounds like it to me is not forcing quiet and not forcing thoughts in or out. It's just letting them be. So it sounds very meditative.
Sometimes the TV's on, or sometimes the radio's on. Sometimes the light might be on. Like I don't sit in a particular pose or anywhere specific, or have candles and things. It's like I just try and open my mind and let something come in and let it go out. That's probably. So I think you're describing meditation. So yeah, I can meditate. Amazing.
There we go. One question I had for you, and which would be nice to apply to, like, now you're a father. Do you think that there becomes, luckily it sounds like you were quite talented in varied subjects, varied skills, at like a young age, which is obviously great. So that's a positive thing. It's obviously easier as someone, if they've only got one thing to do to go to, you go, okay, well, I'm gonna put my eggs in this basket because that seems to be the only thing that I have aptitude towards. Is it scary? Is it hard? I feel like from my experience, there is a lot of pressure for children at that age, like 15, 16, making options to pick something specific. In sport, you potentially have to start young to compete. So I understand why from that respect. But there's so many examples of myself. You were talking about performers who have got all these skills and they don't realize how creative and valuable they are as people that can do other side hustles and do all these other things. Do you think that there's this impression that if you choose something, then you're stuck down that path? Like, it's just an open question. You can clear what I think. I don't think that people are stuck with one thing, but I feel like from that perspective, you feel like it's your whole world. You know what I mean? You only have that one standpoint. I don't think that was a very clear question. I was just kind of saying things at you.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. So you're saying if you find yourself and essentially your passions, the opportunities all fall under one roof to go down that path. Yeah. I suppose what's a pro to con to that? I think now my view is that it's about whatever you choose. It's about just being developed as an all-round human being. Those skills can interchange, and there's massive evidence in that. If I see people that have now stopped within the dance or theatre profession, and they go on to do other things and completely excel in that. So it's what you learn within that, even around the topics of like discipline, the usefulness and the playfulness that you have, because you're constantly trying to create. So that really dictates you as a person. It allows you to be free within that. I think that there are different options. I currently have an athlete who's gone full time, but yet this particular athlete hasn't grown up doing that sport. So it's interesting to say, yes, they do need to start from a young age. And there's certain skill sets. When we look at the attitude towards the 10,000 hours, if we take that,
yes,
the younger you start, the more opportunity you've got to perfect that skill, which is great. But as a child, you don't necessarily have the autonomy to make decisions for yourself. You don't challenge that process. But if you come to it slightly later, you start to have autonomy. You're more curious, and you can actually develop. There's an athlete now called Kat Matthews, and she came to the sport I think at 24. So she thinks she's a physiotherapist in the army, and yet she's just gone on to win multiple like 70.3 champs, and she still trains like an age grouper with a full-time job. So it's I don't think there's a right or wrong way. But it's just applying your skill.
That's the outcome I was hoping for. It's good to. There's no right or wrong way. It's good to put your eggs in one basket. It's good to spread them out. It's good to have multiple passions. It's good to have a focus. Like I agree with you with I think the point, the conclusion that you're getting to. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's no path. I think it should just be more normalized, and kids at that age should probably feel less pressure. I do have a question from Mr. Dan Cunningham for you, and he says, do you enter a meditative state during endurance events? And I'd also like to double up that question and to ask you about, from your answer before, your own spirituality, and it seemed like you weren't so sure on what meditation was or means to you. So I'd like to just go into that a little bit further with you, and if you like how that relates to your performances, and just tie it into Dan's question.
Cool. Before we go on to Dan's question, I'm going to try and link this together to what we were talking about around do you have options to change and etc. One actually piece of advice. So my nephew is 16, and he was sort of making different choices, and the key thing the one aspect that I saw wasn't happening. He didn't see it through, so he was simply just dipping his toe in. And the one thing for me is that if you're going to do something, commit to it. And now that might be easy to say because there might be financial constraints, there might be other constraints that you don't have. But I think my one advice is this: just run with that thought and go and see it through to the end. Because once you reach the end point, you can reflect and then you can learn on everything you've just gone through. And that can be then applied to transition across or move forward. So I just wanted to sort of wrap up that thought. Thanks, Dan, for your question. I think that's also a really challenging thing to answer. So Dan's question was...
Firstly, tell us a little bit about your... we haven't, for people who don't know you, we've not spoke about your sort of endurance credentials. You mentioned that you're bringing up, you have got your own endurance company for training athletes from different areas. Endurance is a massive positive and pro for lots of different things. And but tell us a little bit about confirm, why would Dan be asking that, basically? Because you've done some really cool stuff.
Yeah, so because of my connection to sport from a young age, I wanted to find something that was for me, that was performance related. I wanted to be able to measure and compare like where I was to the best athletes in the world. And now what it gave the option to do, or the ability to do, was to go into what I call age group triathlon. So I compete at triathlon, but I compete against people that are the same age as me. They're getting a little bit older, turning 40 this year. So hopefully I have a big party. So I compete against the best in the world at that age. So they're sort of non-pros, but they're very dedicated and passionate. And actually some of them actually train like a pro. It's quite fascinating. So I've really loved the sport of triathlon and the diversity it has. And it's definitely been a big part of my life for probably the last 5 or 6 years. So yeah, interesting to know what your thoughts are around your own sort of state or mental state when you're doing endurance sports. Well, Dan, I think there's, I talk about my athletes a lot, and I don't know, sort of share what I'm thinking. And I think, yes, I'm very much metric driven. So am I in a meditative state? I think I'm in a race zone state. And you'll probably describe that as a race meditation. I think what you said, Elliot, was there's different meditation. I think it's a different type of focus, of mental awareness. And I think the reason I'm saying that is because I had a bad race about two years ago in the World Champs in Lausanne. And if you don't know much about the sport of triathlon, it's non-drafting for age group, meaning you cannot sit within 12 meters of the bike in front. So if an athlete's here, you cannot sit within 12 meters because you're gaining benefit. And I came out of the water with a German guy that I raced a lot. And then for the whole bike section, he basically sat on my wheel for the whole race. And I remember that definitely affecting my state, my sort of my preparation of what I'd gone through. So that upset that. So do I get in a meditative state? I'd say yes. There is a specific state that I get myself into, because I was him racing my wheel totally upset that, and everything else around just my performance, the way I thought about the course, or what I was thinking doesn't come into normality. And that generally comes through training, when you train in these different states. And there's lots of different tools and tricks, because it's hard. You're racing on your limit, and you have to try and trick your mind into being positive and being in the now, like making decisions in the now. So just think about it. Every meter you travel on the bike or on the run, you're making decisions all the time. But you've got to be aware of what those decisions are, I suppose that's why I like triathlon, because you're in your own state. You're not really racing other people in a weird way, even though you are, because you're in control of that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's still a single event, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I count my pedal strokes. Sometimes I count my breaths. sometimes I'll visualize a lamppost. So there's all these little things that keep me focused. I think that could be a state of meditation for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It still seems like coming from a, it aligns to your personality and the way you like to learn. The metrics, the maths that you brought in from when you felt like you were strong when you were younger. So it all incorporates into the amalgamation that Chris is today. You did mention about like firing the question back to me, and I have to be honest, I don't think I've done anything that falls into the endurance realm myself. That leads me on to like a question of, you probably know the answer to this, about the percentage of when people are performing. So normal people, which I would class myself as, like all the way up to pro athlete. I put myself on the fitter end when I'm active, which I've not been as much. How much of it is genetic versus years and years of training?
I think, when you come on the realms of a fixed mindset versus growth mindset, then, right? Mm-hmm. So do you believe that this is innate and it's all talent based? You've got a very fixed mindset, or do you go down the route that actually these things can be learned? Yes. If I went to become a pro athlete, I'm actually too large for a pro athlete in terms of what the genetics say. I'm actually more of a power athlete. Mm-hmm. But I'm probably built to be a rower, like 87 kilos. Well, I could probably about 90, 95 kilos. I've got a big +8 apex. So genetics come down to a certain point for sure. Sure. But there are also athletes that work a lot harder than other athletes. And that for me is what I classify as, I often say to my friends, Mark, the athlete's just different gravy, right? Because when you go for a Sunday lunch and you get the gravy, you're like, that's the best gravy I had. And I'm like, that's how I describe it. They're just different. But it does come down to hard work. And the meticulous, they're very meticulous about what they do. So they find out exactly what's right for them. Like one approach doesn't necessarily lead to the same approach. So when I talk about like process, like how did you get there? Because these two athletes could be at the same level, but their process is so different. What this one does compared to this one, their needs, the desires it wants is all different. They're going a bit of a tangent there, but that's fine.
That's how I do. Yeah, it definitely answers the question. And I guess that
actually, if I can answer the question in a bit more detail, so I would say there has to be an element of talent and genetics, but at the end of the day, you've got to work flipping hard for it. And that's what
I was going to round off to, is in how these questions, I'm asking them from a certain standpoint, but how they apply to everything in life, right? Like you mentioned about, no matter which route you choose, there's no right or wrong way to go about it, but just put a little bit of effort in, put a little bit of mindset in. How much can physical activity for a normal person help towards their mindset in the success for them in everyday life, in their whatever they're trying to achieve?
How can physical activity support their success? That's a great question, isn't it? You pinged it there. It's physical activity is just, we look at the evidence-based, we look at the science behind it. We look at the minimum activity that the body needs. And my philosophy comes down to like movement is life, right? You see a river or pond that the water hasn't moved. You've got shit on the top, the sludge. There's nothing there. When you see a river, it's the same thing. It's all two bodies of water. One's moving, generates life. So I can only really resonate. That's the sort of analogy that resonates with me. And I'm going to flip it on its head and go, the people at the end of their life, like my grandma, when I was talking to her a lot, I've asked her how she was, and unfortunately, her reply was, "I'm not doing great." And I sort of said, "Well, what's up?" She said, "I've stopped being able to go out and to move." And that keeps just that active state, that little bit of exertion, it brings the blood flow. Different people need different things, but just being able to move, I think that for me is just something that we should never take for granted, but really actively try and incorporate. Because if the people that do suffer from, say, other illnesses or disease, one common theme that runs through is that their lack of their sedentary states. So I can only think of it from that perspective, that exercise. But on the flip side of that, I'm going to go put a devil's advocate, is that some people have an unhealthy relationship with exercise, and they become exercise dependent. They're pushing all the time to try and chase those hormone releases. They can't take a day off. So that can flip on to have a detriment. The moment you say you've got to take a rest day, they can't do it. So it's like exercise dependency.
Yeah, it's very refreshing to hear you say that, Chris, as someone who is, you're competing at an athletic level, and there has to be a lot of dedication towards it. I personally think, and it comes up a lot in every conversation that I have about balance, is really important. And I tend to see it a lot, but it doesn't get spoken about that much. About you pick up good habits and put on some potentially some muscle mass, and you've seen things improving, but then you're constantly chasing this improvement and like an addiction to these micro improvements. What just like anything, any addiction, what are you suppressing? What are you not actually, what you're distracting yourself from? What are you not addressing? So it's really nice for you to bring up that side of the story too.
Yeah. On that note, it's always understanding the impact that has on a wider scale. I did talk with some triathletes around sort of that 360 approach, and we started off by defining that we're going to swim, bike, and run every week. We're going to strength train, and then we started to get on. Well, I need to recover. I don't want to work out in the evenings because that's my time when I can make these phone calls or see my friends. It's really important to me, and I can't do this because actually my priority is to be able to fit this into my life. And so it's understanding the wider impact that relationship with exercise has. Is there a social element for you in that? So I think social, physical, emotional. So it actually gets quite complex.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a big picture when it comes to anything, whether it's athletes or whether it's the everyday person picking up some new habits and some new movements. I found it very interesting. What sprung to mind when you said about movement is life is that, we are actually fighting a battle. There's obviously going to be that percentage of people that love to keep busy and love to keep moving. For the people that don't necessarily do it always or don't find it natural, phones and devices and things that are stationary in your hand, but the screen is moving the whole time. That's it's leading to habits of less movement. And I don't want to take it to the furthest example. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. You've got a little one, the animated movie WALL-E, where everyone is sat in. They're sat in like electric hover chairs, and they're all obese because they don't need movement anymore. All their stimulation is from the screen, and they can do everything from moving a few fingers. So yeah, it just made me bring up that idea was in my head, so I just wanted to vocalize that. And
well, that's one of the disadvantages of tech, right? So the evolution of tech, the tech explosion, that's been the big detriment to us moving. So if you think about it, I no longer need to stand up and even change the channel on my TV. I don't even need to lift the remote now. I can sit there and go, I can actually speak, like echo show or things like that. I can actually then turn my lights down by speaking. I don't even need to move anymore. You think, oh my word, that's taking that side away from us. So
the convenience aspect. has definitely, it's going full circle. And just like anything, I think we'll always revert back to nature and like the natural state of things and come back. Do you ever think, you mentioned technology and you mentioned also your love of metrics. Do you ever worry that you've lost some pure joy from movement when you're always recording stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm very well aware of this, and I use metrics as just one part and parcel of that. The fact of a subjective nature of just how I feel. Yes, this workout says this, but did I push hard enough? Is it too hard for me today? And so all those other things. I shared something I purposely made a choice about before races. So the week before any race, I don't measure anything. So I don't have any metrics. And the reason behind that is that, one, if the metric is good, that could give me a false sense of where I am. And if the metric is bad, it can obviously have a mental effect around that. So actually, I don't track anything. So, sometimes I'd go out and I always look at what I did at the end and reflect on it. But sometimes I'll go out, okay, I'm just going to run to here and back. But it's hard to stray away from the metric because I know exactly how far that is to run. But I don't get the connection with nature that some people have, where they go, oh, the joy of just going out and seeing that blue sky when I'm running. I go, I don't have that relationship with that part, or that doesn't inspire me to run. My relationship is sometimes it's actually more, I need to be able to do this to achieve this. So my other movement joy comes from outside of those sports. So if someone says
that's what I was about, tennis, you took the words out of my mouth. I was about to ask that. Let's go and play a bit of tennis or a bit of table tennis, or we can just walk around this lake here. Feed the ducks. Like that's cool. That's the joy, and the fact that I can do it without feeling pain, feeling free. When my son runs at me and tries to rugby tackle me, I can still do that. So it's just categorized in a different position, isn't it? I guess it is you're trained to think those things, and you wouldn't be able to get to the heights and accolades that you have done without training and thinking like that. So one part, just linking it back again slightly, is those goals and reaching those things, and just relating it to like everybody who's listening. As long as you have a healthy relationship with it, picking up a new sport, a new movement, a new way of training, and seeing, there's obviously within the first 2 to 4 weeks, the nervous system just gets used to the movement, and there's like a beautiful metaphor about the strength already being within inside you, even though all that improvement, you'll know better than I do. So there's that, but I was just trying to relate back to that, creating these little goals, these little things, and achieving them is just showing you that if you try something new, you can win at it. Then clearly it's going to be inspiration to do the things that you already know you can do. I don't know if that makes any sense, but a couple of points in there. So.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you do something for the first time, the motor skills, the fine motor skills they develop quite quickly. So it's always that thing of, you see it on, do you ever watch The Cube?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're often formed with tasks, so they'll do it first time, and then third, fourth, fifth time, they'll just get better at it. They haven't really got better. Yeah. It's just the process. It's just the process of that. Yeah, exactly. They'll come it tomorrow, and they haven't perfected that. That's the thing. It's that thing of that motor skill. It will just be developed through repetition, but it's not ingrained into your body at that point. So I thought we'd just touch on that. But I think what we're going down the route is that what keeps you motivated, what stimulates that motivation to continue. And there is like success drivers and what people value as success. Just being able to reach that point or walk to there, like pain free, or my grandma's walking up the stairs pain free, that's success. That's still what he wants to achieve. He doesn't have any ambition further than that. So I think it's all in relation to what your goals are and what you want to get out of it. And everybody will respond differently.
What do you think, you know, being so, like, I've ridden beside you before, like in a class, and for people that don't know, like I class myself as pretty strong on the bike compared to like the average person. Then Chris is just like a crazy next level. What, you know, someone that's such a high level, what do you think, or do you think about it being intimidating for normal people to get involved in exercise or in a gym environment? Do you ever think about that, and what things that we can do as fitness professionals to make it more comfortable or less intimidating?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question.
Especially, you know, post-COVID as well. You know, there's all those extra stresses, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the barriers to exercise are so ingrained in those individuals. It's about us really, I think, we reflect on ourselves and knowing who we are and what we offer, I think, is the first point of call. And then having the ability to share that, because then you attract the right kind of people, because within this whole fitness sector, the diversity is now massive. You know, there's so many different options for various different people. And it's just having the ability to share that so that somebody finds their outlet. So I think having collaboration and sharing, then I think that's probably the biggest thing that we can do as a sector. To break down barriers, it's just understanding exactly what makes that person tick, and safeguarding them and protecting them. So rather than just throwing yourself into it and breaking down within 2-3 weeks or whatever that might look like, I'm just making presumptions here. You know, really to think, okay, well, let's just find some consistency. And it's a word I use with my athletes all the time. Like, let's just find consistency. Let's look at, rather than the outcome, let's look at this whole process of behavior change. Why is your relationship with exercise not been good in the past? What's been your barriers? There's a whole psychological model called like the grow model, bridge model, and it really taps into that. So we identify what they want to get out of it, and we tap it back in. Well, why is that presenting itself now, and what's stopping you doing that, and getting them to think for themselves. But that's, you know, it's a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Like, quite often we'll go, okay, this is us, this is what we offer. But I think there's much more that can be done around that initial contact to really and the support, the embedded support underneath. If we could tap into that, and you know, there's talk of this AI now. We're thinking about technology, and people say that are being supported by like artificial intelligence and like fitness apps and trackers that keeps them motivated. But I also think that we just got to be better coaches. By coaching, it's about us helping you understand where you want to go. So I'm not going to give you the advice. I really want to tap into that, because that's the human behavior. That's the human aspect of it. I think people are going to be crying out for that contact and that guidance, that support. Someone will really help them to just unlock that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I'm glad that you got there, because that's the similar thing that I was thinking also when it comes to, you know, that point of contact, and then also not only all those things, but how well you click with a certain coach and their personality type, and not being afraid as a coach to know that not every client that comes in is going to adhere and like your training style, your personality, the things that you offer, and knowing that to not let our egos get in the way of them trying maybe potentially the same exercise with a different coach leading them. It might actually fit them a lot better. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but also a secondary question, and I don't know if you've had any thoughts about it recently, and what's, you know, prevalent in the news with, you know, rightfully so, how upset women are as well, how we can apply that to, the fitness environment, and how we can create safer spaces as straight male coaches within the gym environment also.
I've had to write these down. You fired three,
sorry, I fired so
questions.
I just fired so many questions.
So I want to go back to, you've got to be authentic to yourself. I think that's the first point.
Agreed.
On my reflections, I'd always think that I was an inclusive coach, whereas, I'm not as inclusive as I thought I was. So I do need to be able to understand how I'm perceived in that, and what I can do to change to break that down. But yet I know who I am, and I'm authentic to essentially a performance coach. So I attract the people that within that, and then creating that network to then go, look, this person might be best for you because this is their speciality. So I talked about collaboration and things like that. So I think that's really key. Then with regards to creating a safer environment, it's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it until now. So I'm sort of going to unravel my thoughts, if I may.
Yeah,
on this topic.
Please do.
So I think we have to question. So I did hear something around women-only gyms. And so actually, I asked my wife, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I said, what are your thoughts on this? And she then said, actually, I feel more intimidated in a women-only gym than I do in a mixed environment. Oh, okay. Why is that? So, well, I actually want to go there I want to go to the gym for a specific purpose. And I like seeing everybody doing things differently. And I learn from that. I went, oh, that's a really interesting thought. And now we're presuming that we're going to compare the two environments. What are the cases in the gym where women don't feel safe? And I'd like to just try to understand that first.
Yes.
There's an aspect of us as coaches that if I'm giving some verbal cues and it's not necessarily landing, I then visually say, look, try this. This might help you then perform that better. Awesome, still not happening. Then there's always a kinesthetic approach, but there has to be a point where you ask permission for that, so that person always has to feel safe. One of the questions I ask for people that I don't have a greater understanding or knowing of them when they first come in is, look, how do you want me to coach you today? Like, I see this is one of your first sessions with me. Look, what do you want to get out of the session, and how do you want me to coach you today? So I think it's inviting them to give them their standpoint, and then they go, oh yeah, just know what, I'm just going to throw myself in, and if you see anything wrong, then cool. So it gives you direction, and it also gives you permission to act from their expectation. So there's will that benefit that safety and break that down? I hope so. So there's maybe one point.
I think that leads to communication, right? And not being able. What you're saying is, let's just talk about the way you want to be coached, but also how you feel, and it takes the coach to lead by example and vulnerability, I think, to put those subjects out in a safe space and in the open, and we can talk about it and we can find the common ground easier.
I think it's just never putting you into a situation that anyone can that where you feel that person is going to feel unsafe, and just being aware of that, having awareness of giving people what I call, you get like personal space and then personable space. Mm-hmm. So the moment I come into there's literally a fraction between it. So literally step in, you're in their personal space. That little bit further back, you're personable. We're in a place where they know you're going to communicate. So it's really just adhering to that.
Enforcing that and leading by example and talking about that, as a coach who trains coaches as yourself, you think that's an important thing and something that we should start looking at vocabulary wise?
100%. Yeah, it's just creating awareness of the best protocols. Like, have you thought of this?
Yeah.
So think about your behavior. Could that be deemed any different to what you believe? I think that's where we can come to the standpoint.
Let's go over that question. That point again. That was a great sentence you just said.
So, in terms of your behavior, is their perception of your behavior the same as you feel it is? That makes sense. So, is that what again?
I thought that was really powerful. That
yes,
the behavior that you're doing, and your intention that you have. Can you step outside of that for a second, and could that be interpreted in a different way?
Yeah, it's almost thinking like, I think I'm a rhino, but someone thinks I'm an elephant. So it's how you're perceived. So just understanding that.
Things as simple as, I think that we need to take into account, you don't want to overanalyze everything you do, and things, obviously, it should be empathy led, and the vocabulary should be talked about, and skills, but it's a difficult one, trying to unpack and unlearn all this, because things as simple as holding a gaze for too long in the wrong way could fall under that, making somebody feel unsafe or unwanted attention or these different things. So I think the way you started was understanding first, and maybe let's do some asking and some listening to start with would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the same approach. We talked about just a whole new topic that's come out of the Sarah Everard case. Let's do some communicating. Let's do some listening, and let's build that picture. And then from that picture, we can then start to reflect on, that you said, the behaviors that we display. And I've definitely thought about it and thought, well, what can I do? Have I done anything that could essentially made someone feel unsafe? Not just a female, but another male. And I thought, well, do you know what? When I go out running, if I see someone on the same side, I'm running up behind them. I've known they've jumped a few times because I've been running up behind them, and they haven't heard me until I'm a meter behind. So, of course, what could I do? Well, do you know what? All I need to do is be able to move out and move away, so they don't have that jumpiness feeling. Because the more they experience that, the more just who they're going to be. Yeah, and then help them feel safe within that.
The last thing you want to do is induce fear unnecessarily, and sometimes we just this. I think that's glad why we're having this conversation. Is some of the actions that I do could probably, I could be thinking something completely different. I need to get back because I've got something in the oven and I'm walking faster, and then that could, that's the one thing that's on my mind. But it can be, like you said, elephant, rhino can be perceived in a different way. So we want to try and eradicate that unnecessary induced fear, I think, is a good way to go.
And that's what you said then about in your own story of something has influenced your behavior that's going on that nobody knows. You're just walking faster because something's going on in your life, and that. Mm-hmm. So, let's just park it there on that one, and think let's just talk about it and listen.
Yeah.
And not jump to conclusions. So let's piece it together. And then definitely. I think the one thing I think that's come out from a lot of, so let's talk already about this whole pandemic, people's behaviors is, why don't we all talk about people taking responsibility? But if we all looked at ourselves and how that can be construed and how that can affect the wider community, and actually one of my bosses, so Anthony talks about this a lot, the Swedish way of life. And there's anyone watching, he's probably going to kill me when I say like Jantelag, I think it's called. And he's talked to me a lot about it, is that they live their life to benefit the wider community. So they talk about like freedom of speech, but you can't just say anything. You have to think of the impact that that's going to have on the other people. The moment that somebody parks into a disabled bay, and think about it, that's just being selfish, and it's not contributing to society being free and those people that need it to have access to it. So that should be our behavior, and that should always be the greatest thing, that anything I do to stop that freedom of other people, then I think we should reflect on that. So yeah, there's always going to be things that come up that we can't control. But just be in control of yourself and just be the best person. And live your life by the way you want to be talked about at your funeral. That's what my dad said once.
Yeah, I love that, and that's a lovely way to round it up as we are just coming in on the hour, and wrap things up here with Chris. And I've thoroughly enjoyed, the complicated and multi-part questions that I've been thrown at you and tackling them with enthusiasm. So I appreciate that. I have got one final question for you that I just want to that I tend to ask and wanted to just normalize. I just wanted to ask when the last time you cried was.
Last time I cried. I just came to spring line. I witnessed my athlete. This was on last Wednesday, I think. Yeah. So actually, I cried twice that day. One was I was watching. I asked my athlete, and then she's being mentored, if I could listen in, turn my video off and listen in. And halfway through the conversation, there was just a complete change of body language, and I got really emotional that I'd seen this change, and I went, "Whoa, that was really tough," and they'd really unlocked something, and I thought, "Oh wow!" And then later on that day, there's a beautiful movie. It's nominated for the Oscar for Best Animation. It's like 3 minutes long. I can't think of the name of it. I'll send it to you so you can post it up. But it's basically saying, if you could change your perception, or what is the effects of perception on your life? And in short, it's a little dog on a boat with a guy fishing, and this little bird keeps nicking the worms. And then it turns around about a minute later, the dog witnesses this bird flying back to its nest with no food for its children. Because it's just a perception that a bird was just trying to steal it, but for what context? And this beautiful film, I just went, oh my God, that just blew me apart. And I literally shared it with so many people. So just watch this. This is incredible. This is a 3-minute video, animation. And it's normally, weirdly enough, I probably cried at most animations. There's something raw about it, and simplistic, that just, it's not interpretive. It just hits on some amazing themes that really catch you off guard. Do
you think that's because there's an element of separation where you don't feel you eased into that empathy rather than like personally attacked, not personally attacked, but you know what I mean, as in you can see a man going through that situation, so there's more creativity and less pressure, or do you think that was just a curious point that it's quite deep, isn't it?
It's getting right into the realms of emotions and attachment. I definitely don't have the skill set or the understanding by the medulla oblongata. That's the only part of the brain I know that would have any ability to answer that question. I just flipping enjoyed it.
But just through your experience, that the animations tend to get you, and this seems like one we should all have a little watch of.
Some little movies and little things that take me by surprise. When I just have a cry, I go, "Whoa!" Or just it's amazing. Those moments just to be cherished. Like, just hold on to them. Just let it out. It's great. It's really great.
Well, that concludes things for this evening, Chris. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time, emotion, energy with me.
It's been a blast, mate.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad that we got to do it, and definitely some thought-provoking stuff there for myself, never mind anyone else who's watching. So really, really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, mate. I'll see you soon.
I hopefully will see you soon. Thanks so much, everyone.
I know, say that now.
Bye.